Hello, I'm Alex Crook, and this is the GameDay Podcast from talkSPORT at the end of a brilliant heavyweight weekend. No punch-ups on the touchline for Thomas Tuchel, but Chelsea are floored by a Leeds side who inflicted some heavy blows on the former European champions. West Ham are on the canvas as well after continuing their pointless and goalless start to the campaign, while North London are gearing up for a championship title fight. Plus, big chins required for Messrs Rodgers, Gerrard and Lampard. All that on the podcast that never pulls any punches. This is Game Day from talkSPORT. And I'm delighted to say joining me are Darren Lewis, assistant editor of the Daily Mirror, and Darren Ambrose, who is stepping in for Sam Matterface, who is clearly so floored by Chelsea's humbling at Ellen Road that he couldn't possibly face up to the music. Let's get straight to Shock Sunday. Leeds 3, Chelsea 0. The first time that Leeds have beaten Chelsea since a 16-year-old James Milner was amongst the scorers. And it was a chastening afternoon at Ellen Road for Thomas Tuchel's side. Darren, the tendency in the media whenever one of the big clubs gets turned over is to focus on their deficiencies. But let's talk about Leeds for a minute, shall we? Because I thought they were absolutely terrific. After surviving that early scare when Raheem Sterling missed inside the first 2 minutes, could have been a different game had that have gone in. But two players in particular really impressed me. Tyler Adams, I thought, was terrific at shielding the back four. Looks like he's been playing in the Premier League his whole career as opposed to just a few weeks. And Rodrigo didn't do much under Marcelo Bielsa last season. I think he's the top scorer in the Premier League. I know we're only 3 games in, but he's been given the captain's armband. He looks confident. He looks rejuvenated under Jesse Marsch. And this is just simply because he has the faith of his manager, whereas maybe under Bielsa, he didn't quite feel that love.
Yeah, I think you've got to look at the context of the whole day, the whole performance, because it is a triumph of man management, as you've been saying, particularly in terms of Rodrigo. It is a triumph of man management in terms of the fact that Leeds only secured Premier League survival on the final day of last season. They also lost Calvin Phillips to City, Rafinha to City, to Barcelona rather, over the summer, and lots of people expected morale to fall. But you look at the appetite and the hunger in the performance against Chelsea, not just the goals, but the willingness to work all over the park. And you recognise the fact that Jesse Marsch is doing a superb job. I know he's not everyone's cup of tea. He can rile up other managers. He did so with Bruno Laga the other day. But as far as the job he's doing is concerned, the players want to work for him. The fans buy into what he's trying to do. He had applause from all 4 sides of the ground this afternoon. And I think you've picked out Rodrigo, but you could pick out any number of players in that Leeds team against Chelsea.
Brendan Aronson, Crookie, sorry, mate.
Yeah.
Brendan Aronson needs a special mention. I think he's been fantastic. And we had a caller on the boot room, Crookie. You was there, you took the call. And the Leeds supporter said he's one of the best players he's seen in a Leeds shirt for a very, very long time. And look, there's a few pundits that are looking a bit silly now in terms of calling people nobodies coming into the Leeds team, losing their best 2 players. They're in trouble. They're certainly not. And from that showing there, if they continue, not only are they going to be safe, they're going to be competing for at least a top half finish. And long may that continue for them.
When you say a few pundits, you mean Jamie O'Hara in particular. On Jesse Marsch, I'm not sure his exuberant celebrations running up and down the touchline, jumping into the air would have gone down particularly well with Thomas Tuchel.
Why?
Frankly, who cares?
Why? I mean, you are scoring goals against the team that lifted the European Cup, the Champions League, whatever you want to call it, last year. You're scoring goals as a team that has no real right to compete against a club of Chelsea's size and magnitude. Why should you not be delirious with joy if you're able to do that and run up and down the touchline? I would.
I love to see it. I love to see managers, the passion. I loved it when Antonio Conte and Thomas Tuchel went at it last week. I thought it showed, it's everything you want to see. You want to see passion, desire, and it got a little bit heated, okay. And I think Jesse Marsch has seen that as well. He spoke about it in the week, saying Thomas Tuchel shouldn't be on the sideline. And I think once he got that goal and he showed, I think it was deliberate. I think it was deliberately to rile them up, get the supporters on side, and it worked. They ended up battering Chelsea, and that's partly down to the passion that his team and himself are showing.
Mm.
Well, if that was an upset, we almost had a seismic shock at St James's Park. What a game this was. It finished in the end, Newcastle 3, Manchester City 3, City in front early on. I think we all felt then, well, this is going to be a standard away win for Manchester City. All of a sudden, Newcastle 3-1 up. Callum Wilson with an excellent goal. Kieran Trippier, brilliant free kick. Almiron smuggling in the equaliser. It would have been one of the upsets of the season 3 weeks into the season. Brilliant character, actually, from Manchester City to come fighting back. Haaland with his customary goal. I think we're saying that week in, week out this season. And Bernardo Silva, who is still a Manchester City player, despite the advances of Barcelona. Kieran Trippier was sent off. Then it was reduced to a yellow card. Let's start with that, actually, Darren Lewis, because I think both Ambrose and I felt that it was correct to overturn that red card. Steve Harmison, talkSPORT's North East correspondent, disagreed. What was your take on it?
I think it was the right decision to overturn it. I've got to be honest, I'm not a big fan of Jared Gillett. He's come to the Premier League with a big reputation, but he's made a number of dodgy calls this season. This season included last season West Ham Brighton game as well, when he was a VAR. There have been a number of calls that he has made since he's come into the Premier League that have left fans really unhappy, and this would have been another one had it not been the case. I think it was Peter Banks who was the VAR today and basically advised him to overturn it. It was the outside of Kieran Trippier's boot that made contact with Kevin De Bruyne's knee, not his studs. I didn't see that as deliberate. I didn't see any malice in the challenge. I saw it was an attempt perhaps to stop De Bruyne, but I didn't see it as an attempt to injure him. And had it been a straight red card, it would have been for serious foul play, which I didn't think it was.
Yep, so we think the VAR got it right on this occasion. What does it tell us, Darren Ambrose, about your old club Newcastle and their aspirations for the season? The first time, at the 13th time of asking, that Eddie Howe has got even a single point against Manchester City in his managerial career.
Well, it tells us they're certainly still heading in the right direction. You know, if you look at this time last season and beyond last season when they were struggling under Steve Bruce, Eddie Howe's come in and changed the whole club around. The atmosphere today was sensational once again, and it's always going to be home and away support for Newcastle. They've got a team that can compete. They've got a team that they're proud of going and watch. They can support. They're smiling. You look at the supporters, they're smiling watching them. Saint Maximin today was looked like a man possessed. He was frightening. He was all over the pitch, but he set his standard now. And I think this is how he needs to play. He is a fantastic footballer, but he has to show it week in, week out, not just against the best teams when he wants to turn up. He has to do it when Newcastle need to grind out a point or need to grind out a result. That's when the best players turn up. And Saint Maximin done that today. They were unfortunate not to get the 3 points, if you ask me. But as you said, the character that Manchester City showed, as we've seen for years and years, it was again, they showed that character again. I was gutted that Newcastle didn't finish them off. But, you know, what a sensational game. Already the game of the season. We're only 3 games in.
Yeah, it's been a brilliant start to the season. So many stories, not least this weekend. We'll come on to West Ham and their defeat at home to Brighton very shortly. Did Manchester City, Darren Lewis, just look a little bit light defensively? They lost Nathan Ake to injury. It looked like a difficult afternoon for Kyle Walker. And obviously down the left-hand side, I watched Zinchenko for Arsenal at Bournemouth on Saturday night. He absolutely coasted through that game like a Rolls Royce. I just wonder, might those lack of defensive options cost them over the course of the season?
No, I don't think so. I think Cancelo's a super player. Gundogan was playing in front of him in a 3 down that left-hand side, and Foden in the advanced position. And I still do think all 3 are very capable. I just think that Newcastle are going to be a force to be reckoned with this season. I think they had 5 or 6 clean sheets in their final 7 games towards the end of the season. These were the first goals they've conceded so far this season. And I think the Newcastle attack well, I know how much you think of Callum Wilson when he's fit and ready to rumble. Almiron obviously had a point to prove after that jibe from Jack Grealish last season.
Who was noticeably absent from the squad, by the way, Jack Grealish, with
interesting. Yeah,
an
I think
injury.
Is that in inverted commas?
Yes, 100%.
And as you've been saying, Alan Saint-Maximin, we know how many fans he has at other clubs around the Premier League. So I don't necessarily think it was about deficiencies in the City left side or in that City team. I think they're all very capable players. I just think that Newcastle are a serious team.
Yeah.
If Newcastle are a serious team, are West Ham this season? West Ham 0, Brighton 2. Another excellent away performance from Brighton. But the Premier League table, very early in the season, I know, doesn't make pleasant reading for West Ham. No points, no goals scored, rock bottom as we speak on Sunday evening. Of course, Manchester United could get battered by Liverpool on Monday and change all that. But there were fans calling into talkSPORT after that game and questioning another tepid, another toothless performance. And Scamacca, the big money signing from Sassuolo, once again left on the bench. Does David Moyes at some point need to make a big call, either to leave out Antonio altogether and start Scamacca, or play the two of them and maybe throw a bit more caution to the wind, which isn't usually David Moyes' way?
Maybe. If it continues, of course, he has to try something. We know this. And in my opinion, I think Scamacca done really well midweek, got his goal in the Europa Conference. I think he deserved a start. And it's not so much about Antonio being dropped. It may be rotated every now and then. There's been so much pressure on Antonio as the focal point at West Ham for the last couple of years now. Now there isn't. Now they've got Scamacca, who looks good when he comes on, looks good when he started in midweek. So potentially they should have changed that today. And I'm sure we'll most probably see a change in West Ham's next game, because something has to be done. No one would have expected 3 games in, no points for West Ham. They seem too good of a team for that. Of course, they're going to be okay, but it doesn't make good reading at the moment.
Yeah, and listen, I agree. I think David Moyes is showing a lot of loyalty to a group of players that finished 6th and then 7th in the Premier League and have done superbly well, helped into the semi-finals of the Europa League last season. But at some point, you have to make changes. The team doesn't look fresh enough. It looks a little bit stale. If you look at the other clubs in and around the top 6, and that's where West Ham have aspirations, they've changed. They've deepened their squads. They've changed their lineups. West Ham still look very stale. Mikel Antonio scored 4 goals in 30 games now in the Premier League. He's done nothing wrong. He's been a fantastic servant for the club. But I think, as we all know, strikers get judged on their goals. They do tremendous work in other areas of the pitch, but ultimately you judge strikers on their goals. And if it's the case that maybe he's better in a 2 alongside Scamacca, then that needs to be the case. But you can't go up against a team as canny, as tactically aware as Brighton, whose manager Graham Potter has outwitted now a number of higher profile managers and play with the same West Ham lineup that many people have worked out now from last season. I think in the next game, we should be seeing a drastic change all over the pitch. Maybe Areola in goal instead of Fabianski. I think there should be signings, more signings, because if you look at Forest, and sorry to go on a little bit of a rant here, but I think if you look at Nottingham Forest, they're so decisive with their decision-making over who to bring in. I felt that West Ham, for example, could easily have done a deal for Emmanuel Dennis, the Watford striker who did so well last season. And I think he would have given them depth in their forward line so that you don't just have Antonio and Scamacca, but you've got Dennis as well, if you want to change things up. But at the moment, West Ham are too predictable. And this end of season wait for signings to become available, or whether it's this or that, it's costing them points.
It was a nightmare debut for Thilo Kehrer. David Moyes admitted before kick-off and was accused by some of disrespecting his new signing because he didn't know how to say his name. I think he probably does now, Darren Ambrose, but that is a horrible start to his Premier League career. Giving away that penalty, Danny Welbeck, once again, a real handful.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Danny Welbeck started the season fantastically well, and unfortunately, he's come up against Danny Welbeck when he's playing real as well as he has. Listen, he'll improve. Of course, he'll improve. And look, people mispronounce names all the time. Of course, they do. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce it, to be honest.
I've probably got it wrong.
Wait. You both are not going to attempt to pronounce Tilo.
I think I got the Tilo bit right.
Tilo's easy, yeah, of course. How we got Tilo wrong, I don't know. But listen, that happened. There's no disrespect there whatsoever. But he's come up against Danny Welbeck, who's on top form. And Danny Welbeck still tried to help him out, by the way, by staying on his feet because he felt there was a goal in it for himself, and he didn't. And the penalty was given. That happens. It's unfortunate. It's in the early stage of his West Ham career that it's happened. He'll gain confidence. He'll build on that. He'll improve. He's clearly a fantastic player. That's why they've got him in.
7 points out of 9 for Brighton, despite selling 2 of their key players. Are they the perfect example of how to run a football club in 2022?
Yeah, absolutely. The recruitment's terrific. The manager's tactically aware. There is joined up thinking throughout the club. And if you look at some of the parts on paper, they're not too much to write home about, but they're all the right profile for the club. They all understand each other's game. They've all got that willingness to work hard. And that's why they're pulling off terrific results. I think there are bigger things destined for Graham Potter. Some people, when he's been linked with the higher profile clubs, have perhaps turned their noses up at him, but he is continuing to bloody noses all over the Premier League. And I think that there could well be a big job in the offing for him in the next 12 to 18 months.
Listen, I agree. You know, I've got my affiliation with Crystal Palace, and I have a lot of banter with the Brighton fans, of course, as you do. But I agree, playing some fantastic football, seems to run that club himself, which perhaps he wouldn't do as much if he went to a top club. The recruitment is right at Brighton as well. The only trouble they had before was the goals. The goals, they had the expected goals, but they wasn't putting it in the back of the net. Now they seem to be. They're picking up points. I covered Brighton Newcastle, and Mitoma came on, and I felt he was fantastic. He was already looked like a kind of replacement for Cucurella up the left-hand side. I thought he was brilliant. Obviously, he's still on the bench today. But yeah, we had Steve Sidwell on the boot room about 18 months ago, who said Graham Potter could be the next England manager. And I have no doubt a job of that nature is heading his way relatively soon.
Speaking of fantastic football, let's get across to North London. Game day started on Saturday with Tottenham 1, Wolves 0. Harry Kane, the record breaker. Once again, as Spurs made it 7 points from their first 3 games, despite the fact they were totally outplayed by Wolves in the first half. Kane was watched by the original Ronaldo as he made more history, 250 goals now in a Tottenham shirt, 185 in the Premier League. That's the most for one club since the competition was formed back in 1992. And well, you almost ran out of superlatives for the England captain, don't you?
Yeah, you do. I saw a really good match report today. One of the journalists said that he started the second decade for Spurs the way he's been in most of the first, which is rescuing Tottenham. And again, big strikers score big goals in moments when their teams are under the caution. That's what he's done. The only thing I would say, I'm not trying to qualify anything really, because there is nothing that you would say negative about him. It's actually a positive, because Tottenham have won this game not playing very well at all. Conte clearly has a plan he's trying to execute. It's not quite working yet, but if you can win the points when you're still in transition, then that can only be a good thing. I was at this fixture last season. Tottenham lost it. Wolves were the better side all over the pitch, and they worried Tottenham out of it. I was at Tottenham's game against Southampton last season, where they were beaten at their own stadium, again, after twice leading in the game. And as we all know, Chelsea beat Tottenham 4 times last season, couldn't take a point off them, got a hard-fought point in the second half of last week's game. We all know that the 2 managers did a bit of Strictly Come Dancing. I think as far as... I just think as far as Spurs are concerned, I know everyone's going to talk about Kane, but as I've done in my match report for the Daily Mirror for Monday's papers, I think today, to me, screamed progress. No, sorry, this weekend screamed progress to me. This is a side that are doing better for the changes that Conte has made. And Kane is simply doing what he does best to crown it all with the goals.
Antonio Conte has been a bit sparing so far in the way that he's used those new signings that came in the summer. But I think we saw, didn't we, on Saturday, what Ivan Perisic brings to the party, particularly in the second half when they did improve.
Yeah, Perisic is a wonderful player. And I said this, when he signed, it's kind of a statement signing for me in terms of Spurs. No sell-on fee, really, no sell-on value. It's a signing for the here and now. It's a winner who is brought into the club to improve the first 11. And he is. Every time he's playing, every time I've seen him come on as well. A second assist now for Harry Kane, albeit a flick on, and Harry Kane at the back post. But his delivery is fantastic as well. He's shown that. And the younger players can learn off a player like that. And that's why he's brought in. Now, I read or I listened to a clip from Gary Lineker once saying that why are you always in the right place at the right time? And he said, no, I'm in the right place all the time. And then the ball comes and finds me. And there's no coincidence. And for me, Harry Kane is exactly the same. It's no coincidence he found space at the back post and headed that in. He's a natural goal scorer. And natural goal scorers find that space. We've seen them many times. I played with one of the best in Alan Shearer, and Harry Kane is exactly that. And listen, when he's fit and firing, which he started the season well in terms of goal scoring, it's only a benefit in Spurs. And look, Son's not even started this season. Let's be honest. He's been a little bit off form. Perhaps he's going to be rotated, and Richarlison may come in. But how good is it as a Spurs supporter like myself to have these fantastic players and the ability to chop and change? It's only going to be positive for the football club.
Darren, let me ask you a very quick one. Who do you have in your team? You said you played with Shearer. Who do you have in your team? Alan Shearer or Harry Kane?
Oh, my goodness. That is such a difficult question. You know,
Still Shearer.
I'm going to say Shearer. I'm going to say Shearer. And listen, until Harry Kane beats Shearer's goal-scoring record of the Premier League, I'm going to continue and say Shearer. Only probably because he follows me on Instagram, and if he sees this, he may have a pop at me.
I would only give Shearer the edge because I think Shearer had more pace than Kane does. Doesn't mean Kane isn't a magnificent striker. He clearly is, but I just think peak Shearer certainly had that yard of pace that could get him away from defenders. And he could score, both of them can score all kinds of goals out of nothing. But peak Shearer, he could walk into any team in the world, couldn't he?
He dug me out of a few issues at times. When I gave the ball away and gave a goal away, he'd pop up with a couple. So yeah, Shearer all day.
Never mind peak Shearer. I think Wolves would take Alan Shearer as he is now on Match of the Day because they had so many scoring opportunities. I was impressed actually with Guedes and Núñez. I thought the two new signings did well. Jimenez coming off the bench in the second half following injury was a bonus. But they still need a striker, don't they, Darren Lewis?
Yeah, they do. They were toothless. They dominated for long periods of the game. Had they had a striker, they'd have won this by 2 or 3 goals. The interesting thing in the press conference afterwards was that Bruno Lage was asked about it, and he wasn't too concerned. He said, I'd have been more concerned if we didn't play as well as we did. But there are lots of issues. Players have been injured, players have just come into the club, players who haven't had a pre-season or enough of a pre-season. And so I'm optimistic that once all those things are settled, we will be okay. And I'd have to agree with him because the easy thing could be to say, go into the market, bring in another striker. Who is out there? Who would you bring in? Who would you straight away say, this player is available, why don't they get him? If X player was available, he would probably go to a higher profile club. Let's not kid ourselves. So Wolves have to work with what they've got. Raul Jimenez came off the bench late in the game. Again, once he gets back to full fitness, it could well be that he's the guy to solve those problems. But as far as Wolves are concerned, I can see why fans would be a little bit frustrated.
Well, if Tottenham won playing badly, the same can't be said of their North London neighbours. It finished Bournemouth 0, Arsenal 3 on Saturday team time. The Gunners top of the table with a 100% record, 3 games in. The first time that's happened since 2004 when the Invincibles were in the midst of a 49-match unbeaten run. There were some fabulous goals in there. William Saliba's first in English football was almost nonchalant the way he lifted the ball into the top corner with no backlift at all. And Gabriel Jesus was sensational in the build-up to the first goal. For me, Darren Ambrose, and you won't like me saying this as a Spurs man, this is the best Arsenal team that I've seen for many a year. How has that been possible when you look at where they were just 12 months ago?
Because they trusted Mikel Arteta. They trusted the process. They didn't probably fall to a bit of pressure from the media, a bit of pressure from fans to relieve him of his duties. They had
not
a plan.
Not pundits, Daz.
Not pundits. Well, not me. I was happy to see them failing, to be honest. So I wanted him to stay. But listen, they've had a plan and they've built on it and they've trusted him. And it seems to be repaying him at the moment. Look, Gabriel Jesus is a magnificent player. Now, we're led to believe he's always been this way, and he has, but he was never been the focal point at Manchester City. He is now. He's the main man. And for me, Zinchenko, and I said this at the start of the season, Crookie, you'd back me. I said this could be the signing of the summer. And it's looking like it could be. He's a leader. He's playing the kind of Cancelo role for Arsenal that Cancelo does for Manchester City, and Xhaka's rotating with him. As a Spurs supporter, it's scary for me to see them doing so well, because not only are they winning games, they're demolishing teams, really. And apart from Crystal Palace, where they potentially could have got something out of the game, they're making teams look ordinary.
Yeah, they certainly are. They are benefiting, though, we have to be honest, from a very kind start to the season. In terms of the fixture list, they've got Fulham next Saturday. I'll be there for talkSPORT. Mikel Arteta was quite candid afterwards, Darren. He said we've achieved nothing yet. Realistically, what is the aim? What is the ceiling for Arsenal this season?
Top four, because they don't have enough depth to be able to compete, in my opinion, higher than that.
Don't tell Darren, Ben.
Well, the thing is, there is so much depth. For example, if you look at Spurs have got Son, who can score 20 plus goals, Kane, who can score 20 plus goals. And I've got no doubt that with the firepower that they have, Richarlison could get deep into double figures as well. So, but Arsenal have good quality players, but I'm not sure Nketiah is going to get you 20 goals in a season. I think Jesus will, as you know, I've said so on this podcast. I'm a big fan of Jesus. I think he probably would be the signing of the summer because of the belief that Arteta has put into him, that he isn't a wide man. He can be a central striker and he can make a really effective contribution. I just think as far as Arsenal are concerned, they're not quite at the stage of their development where they would be thinking of the title. I think it should be a return to the top four first, and then bringing in the higher caliber players that would enable them to compete for a title. But if you look at them now, and I still think it is very early days, of course, but what should always enthuse you, in the same way I said about Spurs, is the progress. You can see the progress that they're making. And I think not some people, a lot of people couldn't see where Arsenal were going last season. And they still saw kind of flaky, fragile team that, although they had good individual players, they didn't look like a team. But this Arsenal looks like a team. And that's why they're so exciting at the moment.
Daz, just let me ask you quickly, because if you ask me, my judgment is obviously going to be clouded with a bit of bias. But from what you've seen so far, 3 games in, who finishes higher, Spurs or Arsenal?
Oh, I think that's a really tough one, because on the face of it, I would say that Spurs have got more goals in them in that front line. And then if you add some of the other players who are scoring goals for them, like Sessegnon last week, like Kulusevski, when the front line don't score goals, then you've got a team that has really got that capability to shoot their way, as they did into the Champions League. They've got their way to shoot their way higher than Arsenal. Arsenal do have just as much depth, however, as Spurs do, particularly in the defensive ranks. I'm going to say Spurs to edge it, but it's honestly, it's going to be so very close between the two, because they've both got the pros and cons to make in terms of the argument for who finishes above. I certainly don't think that Spurs are vastly superior to Arsenal. at the moment. Arsenal are a very, very different proposition to last season.
Quick word on Bournemouth. I think they missed the mobility of Dominic Solanke up front. It was a really difficult evening for Kiefer Moore. They're isolated. Unlikely, as I understand it, that Solanke will be fit for Liverpool next weekend. So it could get worse for Bournemouth before it gets better. But it's a really tough start to the season. They've been to Manchester City, home to Arsenal, still to go to Liverpool. I think we'll learn more about Bournemouth as the season progresses. What have we learned about Leicester City so far? Leicester 1, Southampton 2. The Foxes still without a win this season. It's their worst start in 8 years. They're still without any meaningful signings. And for this one, they were without Wantaway, Wesley Fofana as well. Yuri Tillemans also left on the bench. Strange club at the moment, Leicester. There was a big exodus of fans before the final whistle. Those that did stick it out until the end booed their team off. Morale in training, by all accounts, is not great. What on earth has gone wrong at Leicester? Because they've had a really good few seasons, but the wheels seem to have completely come off.
You know what? Like, out of all the games, out of all the seasons, I think today will hurt the most for Brendan Rodgers, because you look at the team, barring Fofana, who obviously wants away, like we're led to believe. It's a strong side. It's probably one of the strongest sides he could have put out. And they to go 1-0 up and then lose to a Southampton team that everyone predicted to struggle this season. I certainly did, and I could be eating my words come the end of the season. It looks that way at the moment. I think he'll be really disappointed. And I said this on the boot room, Crookie. You know I did on Sunday, that if there's no meaningful signings by the end of the transfer window and they don't pick up any meaningful results, I can see Brendan Rodgers walking away. Not getting sacked. I can see him walking away, because I think this is damaging his reputation at the moment. And it's horrible to say. It's horrible to talk about managers leaving or getting sacked, but they're not backing him at the moment. And for a club like Leicester, who have done in the past, it just seems strange. And Fofana leaves. Who knows? Maddison might want away if that's the case. They can't keep getting rid of their best players.
Daz, you mentioned Fofana and you said if reports are to be believed. You've been in a dressing room.
Yeah.
And Fofana's made it clear that he does want to play Champions League football. He does want to... it's an open secret that he does want to go to Chelsea. He asked to be left out of the game at the weekend. He did very similar things when he was a St Etienne player in order to get the move to Leicester. So I just wanted to ask you, really, what's it like when you're in a dressing room when players want to go, you know that morale's low, you know that there haven't been that many signings. What's it like being in that kind of dressing room? Because that you may, I don't know, you may be able to give us a bit of insight.
To be honest, it's not spoken about as much as you'd think. And like I've been there, but I even look at it now and think, well, surely the Leicester players are going to be saying something to him. But then I remember back to my days and think, it's not really spoken about. You understand that he wants to leave, and you just get on with your job. You know, players that play his position won't be bothered in the slightest. They'll be thinking, well, that's another player kind of out the way. It's kind of a selfish way of thinking in terms of the defenders, because they'll think, I'm in the team now because he wants away. And you just try and get on with your job, and whatever happens with Fofana, you let happen.
But when there's one player, fine. But then you've also got Tillemans, who won't sign a new deal. You've got Maddison, who knows that there's interest from Newcastle in him, possibly one or two other clubs as well. Does that start to affect the team dynamic?
Well, it definitely would affect the management. It definitely affect the staff, and this is why I think about Brendan Rodgers potentially walking away. In terms of players, you're looking at the players you spoke about. If Fofana leaves, Tillemans leaves, Maddison's, it's only natural going to be on to his advisors saying, listen, the club's going downhill. I want to be not away, because they clearly love playing for Leicester, but I need to be playing at a top club. I don't want to be on this sinking ship as it looks like it's going to be. So, but then on the flip side, you look at a Keenan Drewsbury Hall will be thinking, if these players go, this opens up a slot to be the main man. So that's the positive sides of thing. You have players that have to step up to the plate. And Brendan Rodgers, if he's still going to be there, which there's no one saying he's going to leave apart from obviously rumour mills, but he's going to be looking for players to step up and take games by the scruff of the neck and try and gain as many points for the football club. And that's what needs to happen. There needs to need to get on with their jobs and be as professional as they can. And whatever happens with other players, you have to accept that.
Can I just quickly say before you move on, Darren? I remember during pre-season, we had a sit down when we were in America with Thomas Tuchel. And one of the answers he gave to a question was really fascinating. He said that some of the senior players at the club had come to him and were saying, "What's going on? Where's the signings?" And that really did strike me, because clearly that does happen at clubs where one or two of the players who are not getting any younger and want to compete are wondering what's going on. And I actually do think that one or two players, I agree. Listen, you've been a player, so you've been in dressing rooms, but I just wonder whether at Leicester one or two players are turning around, maybe saying to the hierarchy, "What's going on?" And it might well be that what they've said has appeased one or two of the senior players, because Vardy signed a new contract.
Yeah, that was good news.
And you would imagine he would not have done that maybe if it was not the case that they are prepared to go big in the final weeks of the window. But I think you're right, Crook. There's every reason to be concerned.
Yeah, it was ironic that the architect of Leicester's downfall was Leicester-born Shay Adams. His first goals since February. Could have had a hat-trick actually denied by a post in the second half. He looked really hungry and fired up, having been left on the bench. 4 points from 2 games for Southampton, since questions were asked about the relationship between Ralph Hasenhüttl and his players. He deserves credit, doesn't he, for the way that he has managed that situation and got them back on an even keel?
I think what we're seeing in both the performances since those reports were a team of players, a group of players willing to fight for him. And it might well be that the players that he picked showed their willingness to fight for him. It might still be that there is a core of players that are still not having the manager, and they may well have been the ones whose dissatisfaction had come to light. But he's been very canny in picking a group of players to save his job, and that's exactly what they've done.
Yeah, Southampton against Manchester United live on GameDay on talkSPORT next Saturday at 12:30 kickoff. If Brendan Rodgers is under pressure, he isn't the only one. Crystal Palace 3, Steven Gerrard's Aston Villa 1, a first win of the season for Darren Ambrose's beloved Eagles, despite going 1-0 down after only 5 minutes. Villa, very poor away from home again. No identity, tactically inept. These were just a couple of the complaints from unhappy Villa fans on the game day phone-in on Saturday night. Steven Gerrard has been there 10 months, Darren Lewis. Is he underwhelmed?
It's a really hard one, this, because I don't want to be critical at all of him, and I tell you why.
Because you're a Liverpool fan.
No, not really. Actually, the reason I don't want to be critical of him is this. We started this podcast by talking about Mikel Arteta and how some people had written him off this time last year. They'd had a bad start. They were near the bottom of the table. There was dissatisfaction, all of the similar things that are happening with Villa. And now we're talking about people eating their words. And it might well be that should Villa stick by Steven Gerrard, people will eat their words again. He clearly has a vision. He clearly has a plan. It's not going to plan at the moment, but these are very, very early days. And I think he deserves a little bit of time. We all call for time, don't we, for managers and for clubs maybe not to be too knee-jerk. I think that what we shouldn't do now is judge him too harshly.
He wasn't happy with the Luka Dean handball for the penalty that was originally missed by Wilf Zaha, put in the rebound. I can see his point, Darren Ambrose, but by the letter of the law, I think the officials had no choice, did they?
No, yeah, I can see his point. It was one of those. It seemed like the law of a year and a half ago that it came back, because when you jump, I didn't feel it was out of his natural silhouette in terms of where his arm was. They deemed it to be a handball, and it was given. But that's easy when you got VAR that slows down. You can see stills. It's always going to look handball. I found it a little bit harsh. Obviously, with my Palace head on, I was pleased with it, but I found it was harsh. And Steven Gerrard has every right to complain there.
With your Palace head on, Zaha, will he still be a Palace player on September the 1st? And what more do they need in this window? Because they still look a bit light in terms of depth to me.
I hope he is. I hope we're still playing for Crystal Palace. I think And I'm going to probably go strong on this for a long, long time. I think he is one of, if not the best player outside the top six. And I only say outside the top six because he's not playing for a top six side. I'm trying to think of other players. You've got Saint-Maximin, you've got Maddison for Leicester, all fantastic players. But if you look at in terms of output, which is what Zaha has always been kind of criticised for, this year alone, only Harry Kane and Son have scored more goals than him, in the Premier League. So for someone who's playing for Palace, that not renowned for having so many chances, he is their main man. So I hope Will stays at Crystal Palace. In terms of what they need, they just need depth. They're playing well. They could have got something out of the Arsenal game. They got something out of Liverpool and kind of battered Aston Villa after they going a goal down.
Can I ask you a very quick one? Sorry to be a bit naughty, Crook. Is he a better player? I just like this best player outside the top six, and I know loads of people will have opinions, so I just want to maybe be a bit mischievous. Is he a better player than Declan Rice?
They're different types of player, of course. I think in terms of...
No, but you said best player outside the top six.
No, listen, I'm not reversing. In terms of play, it's hard to compare those two because they're two different players. But in terms of who I'd prefer to watch in my team, I'd prefer to watch Wilfried Zaha because I think he's exciting. He'll give you more in terms of going forward. Listen, he gets criticised for his attitude sometimes, but that's him. He's passionate. You see when he missed the penalty and then he tapped it in, he was happy and he still gave it to Martinez a little bit. So, that's just the way he is. He plays on the edge. And when he plays on the edge is when he plays his best football.
And is he a better player? Listen, I agree with you. I think he's a terrific player. I'm just because I know people will get in touch and ask.
Bruno Guimaraes.
Is he better than Bruno Guimaraes?
Again, listen, we're picking out players that are different types of players than Wilf Zaha. That's why I picked out Saint-Maximin and Maddison, because they're kind of the players that play a similar role to what Wilf does. Guimaraes and Rice, you can compare with each other. But in terms of output, again, I prefer to watch Wilfried Zaha.
Just one more. Yuri Tielemans?
Yes, I'd say he's better than Tielemans, yeah. Obviously, Tielemans got age on his side. Wilf's coming to the latter parts of his 20s. I would have loved... He was at Manchester United. I would love to, as a neutral, seen how far Wilf could have gone in the game and got some bigger moves. Still might happen, as you said, Crookie. He may move on from now to the transfer window. Who knows? But with my Palace head on, I hope he stays at Palace. With a neutral head on, I still think he could play for a top side, and I'd love to see how far he could go if it was that case.
I think we could probably play Darren's game all night, but we get the impression you love Will Zaha, and we are very happy for you that he is back amongst the goals. And from one England legend who is finding it tough in the dugout to another. Everton won, Nottingham Forest won. Good character, I guess, from Everton to come from behind to salvage a point so late in the game. It was a very route one goal, but could be an important one come the end of the season. They could even have won it actually later on, but they are struggling, Darren Lewis in front of goal. And until Calvert-Lewin gets fit or until they dip into the transfer market, that probably won't change.
Yeah, they've got to sign a striker. They have to. 19 attempts on goal at the weekend. They only scored one of them, and that was to rescue the points rather than to clinch the points. And I think as far as Frank Lampard's concerned, he will know he's done some good business so far in the window. Connor Cody and James Tarkowski, two terrific defensive acquisitions. Onana in midfield has really created a good impression.
What's his name?
I've seen him. I almost got that one. But I think as far as up front is concerned, it is a lot to stick on Anthony Gordon to score the goals to save Everton. He's going to be a good player, but I think he needs to be in a club that's going to help him to find his feet and find his way. And if they were to get a big offer for him, personally, I would listen to it and get the experience that will save the club. It's unfortunate that at this stage of his development, he does have this big decision to make. But I think as far as Everton are concerned, what do you do? Stick by your principles and keep a young player who is adored by the fans, or bring in the finance for him that would be able to get you 2 experienced strikers and save you this season, I think I'm fairly clear what I would do.
We'll talk about finance at Nottingham Forest in a minute, but let's talk about Brennan Johnson first of all. 19 goals in the Championship, such a key player in their return to the Premier League after 23 years away. Off the mark now in the top flight. Darren, as a player, how big a milestone is that to get your first goal in the Premier League?
Oh, huge. The confidence builds straight away. And I listen to Darren Bent a lot. Obviously, I'm good friends with Darren Bent. And he says, as soon as you join a club or as soon as you step up a level as a forward, the first thing you want to do is score. First thing is get off the mark, get the confidence, show people that, yep, he's ready for this level. I mean, it makes me feel old. I played with his dad, David Johnson, at Ipswich, which, I'm looking, thinking, wow, like, am I that old? I don't look on the screens. I know that. But listen, he's a good player. Brennan Johnson is a good player. And I know he can step up. He clearly does. But until you get that first goal, there's always going to be question marks. And he's got it now. And I've no doubt we may see a little run of goals because we've seen that before with forwards and he'll be no different.
A debut for Forest for Morgan Gibbs-White following his astronomical move from Wolverhampton Wanderers. Darren Lewis, I'll ask you about this. A lot of clubs, as I understand it, unhappy with Forest and the fact that they're spending so much money, almost inflating the market when it comes to people like Ismail Assar, for example, and João Pedro at Watford. Do those clubs have a point?
No, they don't. It's up to Forest how they spend their money. It might well be that they see a role for Morgan Gibbs-White that will enable them to justify the outlay on a very good player. I've got to say, he's only 22. He's got his whole career in front of him, and that money will enable them to get value. Now, look, as far as he's concerned, I think it was 13 goals he scored last season, including the goals he scored in the playoffs. So straight away, you see that they are looking for him to get the goals from midfield that will help them as they bid to climb the table. I think I actually quite like Forest's work in the transfer market. Initially, I was a bit concerned at the number of players that they'd signed, but then you bear in mind they lost a lot of players. They had players who were on loan. There were players who chose to go elsewhere. They were players that they couldn't hold on to. So they had to do something. And what they've done is go into the market. They were decisive with their acquisitions. They paid the money that clubs wanted. If other clubs are jealous, that's not really Nottingham Forest's problem, because Steve Cooper's already shown that he can be a good manager with the performance against West Ham, followed up by this weekend's performance as well. I think they're going to be okay this season. In fact, I can see them staying up.
I do. You know what? Clubs that come up, you can't really win, to be honest, because with Nottingham Forest's case, they've signed a lot of players. They're kind of getting criticised. Why are they doing this? They're signing too many. It's a big turnaround. If you don't sign enough, it's like, oh, they're not having a go. They're not trying to stay in the Premier League. So you can't really win. I for one, I agree with you, Daz. I think they're going to be okay. Out of the 3 promoted sides, I think they'll be the one to finish the highest.
Okay, still one more game to catch up on, and it was absolute belter of a West London derby. Fulham 3, Brentford 2. This was a really entertaining game with the inform Alexander Mitrovic having the final say with a 90th minute winner, which sent the majority of Craven Cottage bonkers. Mitrovic now has as many goals this season as in the whole of his last Premier League campaign. What's changed, Darren Ambrose?
Confidence. I think the team around him know what he's bringing to it. Listen, I can go on and on and on, but it's confidence. He's come into it. He smashed the Championship record last year. There's a lot of question marks. Can he do it? I mean, we're already saying now he's already equaled it. Can he do it in the Premier League? It's different circumstances last time. This time he is Fulham's main man. Missed the penalty last game. I said to my son, because Mitrovic's in my FPL team, I said, listen, he's going to score because you have a point to prove. You've missed the penalty or you haven't played well the week before. As a forward, you try everything to get the goal the way he did in the last minute. But as the winner, fantastic header. And for me, I know I said Nottingham Forest will finish higher the promoted teams. I think Fulham will be okay as well, by the way. I kind of thought they wouldn't, but watching them, if he stays fit, Mitrovic, if he scores 15 plus Premier League goals, which he's heading that way quite comfortably, they'll be okay for them.
Yeah, someone else with a point to prove is Andreas Pereira, having left Manchester United. I thought he was terrific for Fulham, so good credit to them. Ivan Toney, continuing his good form from the end of last season, another goal. Bit unlucky maybe with the one that was ruled out for offside. He's creating chances for other players now as well. Is there a chance, Darren Lewis, that he maybe could be subject of interest from bigger clubs between now and the end of the window?
Absolutely, yes. And it's easy to see why. Good in the air, good on the deck. A real leader, courageous forward. And yeah, there will be one or two other clubs. I wouldn't be surprised if Everton had a little tickle at him as well, when you consider the service he would get from the wide areas and the presence that he has in the box. Having said that, I wonder if he might look at Brentford and see a team that plays to his strengths. They're very intelligent in the way that they go about their business. They've got a real plan and a vision. And the reason why he is subject of interest from other clubs is precisely because of the work that Thomas Frank has done with him. Personally, I'd stay at Brentford and see what this season brings, and then maybe see what else is out there.
Yeah, Toney could well be a name that comes up between now and September the 1st. We'll have regular updates on talkSPORT, including daily on the White and Jordan show. That's all we have time for on this podcast, though. My thanks to Darren Lewis and Darren Ambrose coming off the bench, as he always did in his playing career, to cover for the absent Sam Matterface. Don't forget, you can watch us now on YouTube, as well as downloading from all your usual podcast suppliers. Big week on the talkSPORT network. We've got live EFL Cup football Tuesday and Wednesday night. Game day returns next Saturday with that Southampton against Manchester United game from St Mary's, and we'll be back with a preview of all the big weekend action on Thursday. Thanks for listening. This has been Game Day on talkSPORT.